All right, so first off, I want to point out that the screen that we're on right now, this is just, since we're pointing to a test system at the moment, just a temporary login page. You'll be logging in from First Financial's website using your existing login ID and password. So first off, what we're going to do is we're going to log in. Okay, one thing that it did not show that I need to explain is that upon your first time logging in, it's going to ask you for a secure access code. And what this is this is going to be a value that you can send to have sent either to your email, phone, or you can also get a text message that's going to provide you with a 6-digit code that you're going to enter in order to validate you as a user. And then at that point also, you're going to be requested to either register your device or not register. And what this will do is this will give you an opportunity to not have to get that secure message every single time upon logging in. And it's highly recommended that if you do not have, or should I say, if you're on a public device, one that other people use, then you're recommended not to register it for security purposes. So, but now what we want to talk about here is we're on our home page, which is going to be the landing page where you'll be sent to initially when you log in. So first thing I like to point out is we have a listing of accounts here on the screen, but also notice that we have various groups as well. Now, by default, what's going to happen is that you're going to have all accounts grouped in one area here. So let me go ahead and just put them back just so we can show you how they're going to look when you actually log in for the first time. So bear with me for 1 second. We'll go ahead and reset that. Okay, so when you log in, it's going to look just like this. But what you'll have an opportunity to do if you choose is you'll be able to drag one of these accounts here by clicking and dragging. And you'll notice here that we have a little envelope. So I can click here and I can drop this right into this envelope, which then creates a new group. So at this point, what I can do is I can name my new group, say, for instance, Company B. Click on the check mark. At this point in time, now we have our account segregated out. In addition, what we can do is you can click and drag additional accounts into that existing group or into a new group once again, depending on what my need is. So in addition, what we can also do is at the top right-hand side, we have the print button, which gives you an opportunity to print your accounts. And then also you can click on, if you notice these vertical lines here, depending on what your capability is for each account, you can click and either view activity only, where you can click and it'll bring you into that activity screen. Or let's see if we have one here that also has transfer capability. There we go. We can also click on quick transfer. And when I do that, watch what happens. There we go. So since you clicked on the account, it automatically fills in the from account. You just select your to account and then enter the dollar amount here, and then click on transfer funds when completed. So next, what we have are our summary down at the bottom, both for assets and also for debts. And what it's going to do is going to give you an opportunity to view as a whole each one of your accounts as far as your assets and also your debts. You can either click on the individual account here, or you can click on previous and next, depending on which account that you want to view. So now if I click on one of these accounts, this is going to bring us into our next screen, which is going to be account details and transaction history. So first off, you're going to notice that we have a listing of all of our transaction history. In this case, this is just a test account, so there's not very many. But this will give us an opportunity to view the posted and pending transactions for this specific account. By default, you'll have the newest up on top. On the right-hand side, we have the icon that looks like a down arrow. If I click on this, this is our export function. This will give you an opportunity to export out to an Excel spreadsheet, CSV file, Microsoft Money, Quicken, or QuickBooks. If I click on print, this will give me an opportunity to print out a listing of my transactions. And then the blurb right here is our account inquiry. So here's where everything gets filled out automatically as far as for this account, your subject and also your query details. The only thing you need to do is enter in your question. and then click on send. That will immediately send this secure message over to First Financial for response. So we're going to click on cancel at this point, go back into our screen. So let's go back into our account. And now what I also want to do is I want to click here on details. This gives me an opportunity to view additional details surrounding this account. And then if I click on filters, this gives me an opportunity to view filters or ability to decide which transactions I would like to view from my account. Simply just click here and either A, you can decide on a date range, including a custom date range, transaction type, which would be either it's pending or posted, credit or a debit, dollar range, or check range. And then click on apply filters, and only those transaction or that transaction will display on the screen. As I mentioned also, if you click on any of these transactions, you'll see additional details as well, and be able to print out that transaction if you choose. So next we'll go into messages. This is our secure message function. It's a two-way function, so you can also receive secure messages here as well. Newest will be up on top. Unread messages will be in bold. If you choose, you can also delete out individually, one at a time, these messages, or I can click on select all and delete out all at one time, and then click on the trash bin. In addition, what we can do is we can click on new conversation. This will initiate a new secure message to First Financial, depending on which mailbox is selected. So if, for instance, you have a question about wires, click on wire transfer services, enter in your subject and your message, and at the bottom you can click on send once you've completed. So we can just do that real quick. We'll just say test, and we can enter in a message. And then if we click on send, watch what happens. First off, you'll get an overlay screen letting you know that your message was sent successfully. Close that, and then you'll see here at the top, this is our secure message that we just sent. You can also delete out this way as well. Next, we're going to go into our online activity log. Now, online activity log is going to show you all of the transactions that were initiated from within online banking within the new system. Also be aware that these transactions will not purge. So you have an opportunity, even a couple of years from now, to view activity that was performed back in 2017 if you need to look back on those transactions. Also notice that you have single and also recurring transactions that are separated between two different tabs. So if I scroll down a little bit, first off, what we can do is we can click on any one of these transactions and see additional details. If I scroll down, you'll also notice in addition to details, you also have the ability to view the transaction process. You'll see when the transaction was drafted, when it was approved, and then also if it was ever processed. If I go back to the top, on the right-hand side here, we have the export. This will export out any online transactions that you've queried into a CSV file. You can also print the transactions if you choose as well. And then if I click on filters, this once again gives me an opportunity to filter out what activity that I would like to see within the online banking for the purpose of searching. So in this case here, we can click on transaction type, and we can search by whichever transaction type that we would like. The status, and let me explain, just take a pause for a moment and explain the various statuses within the online banking. These are important to understand. So an authorized transaction means that all necessary approvals have been satisfied and that First Financial is authorized to process that transaction. If a transaction is in drafted status, it means that the transaction has been initiated but are still waiting additional approvals. And then finally, the one I want to also mention is processed. A processed transaction means that the transaction has been completed and can no longer be canceled. We can click here on account, decide which account was utilized for the transaction, specify which user of the company initiated the transaction, date range. You'll notice that each transaction, if I scroll down a little bit here, Each transaction is provided with an automatic tracking ID. You can search for that transaction here by that tracking ID, and then also amount range. Click on Apply Filters, and immediately then you'll have an opportunity to view all of your transactions that meet that criteria. Now, if I click on one of these, say for instance, I want to click on payroll. What's going to happen is that you'll notice here, you have an opportunity to customize which columns that you see here on the bottom. So you have an opportunity to select up to 6. So if I wanted to, I can select different ones depending on what my need is. And then when I click on Apply Filters, it will then automatically view and show those specific columns. So next we're going to go into funds transfers. And let me point out, if I go back over to the home screen, that one way to get there when you log into online banking is up here on the top right-hand side. We can click on Transfer Money Now. In addition, you also notice that we have a commercial transactions shortcut as well. So for right now, I'm going to click on Transfers, and I'm going to go here to this screen here, Funds Transfer, which is also another way to get there. All right, so now we're in our Funds Transfer menu. Here you can simply select your From account and your To account. Enter in, if it's a loan payment, you can enter in either a standard payment or a custom interest and principal, and then enter the dollar amount, followed by the date. So if this needs to be a recurring transaction, simply click on this box right here. You'll then have an opportunity to decide how often it should repeat, let's say, for instance, weekly, and then enter in a start date. This will need to be a future date. You cannot make the start date today on a recurring. And then we can click on the end date, or we can click on repeat forever if this needs to be an indefinite repetition. Once I'm done, I can click on Approve. Okay, and once it's done processing, it's going to give me an overlay screen just like this. And then at this point, I can click on View in the Online Activity Log, and this will take me immediately back over to this menu here, which is going to give me an opportunity to view the transaction details. So here, in addition, I can click on the actions on the right-hand side, and I can cancel this if I choose, copy the transaction, view the transaction in a series, or I can also print the details as well, just for clarification. So we're going to go back up to the transfers, and we're going to click on Transfer to Unaffiliated Account. First thing I want to make sure that everybody is aware of is that with this function, you'll need to make sure that the account that you're selecting and the email address when we get in here is of one that somebody that uses the First Financial online banking as well. So this gives you an opportunity to transfer money only to another individual that banks and also does online banking with First Financial. Either A, I can click on Single Transfer, and I can enter in the where I want the money to come from as far as my account, the dollar amount, an optional description, and then you'll need to know what the email address is on file for the user within online banking, along with the last 4 digits of their account number, and then you can click on Submit. At that point in time, then that transfer will occur. Now, if I click on Back, another option is to link an account. This is where you'll have an opportunity to link for recurring types of transactions. Once again, also email address and last 4 digits of the account number, and then click on Submit. At that point in time, when I go to Funds Transfers, it will then be available in the Transfer To menu. Also, to reiterate, they have to have the online banking. They have to be an online banking user also in order for you to utilize this function. But next, we're going to click on Add External Account. So now this is an opportunity to be able to link up an external account for the purpose of funds transfers. So for example, if in addition to banking with First Financial, let's say also you're banking with hypothetically Bank of America, and you want to be able to transfer money back and forth between your accounts at First Financial and Bank of America. So you can click on the account number, enter that in, enter a checking or savings, and then the routing transit number. You'll need to make sure you know what that number is. And once I'm done, at that point in time, then I can click on Continue. Okay, so at this point, I've exceeded my, my previous limit, but what will happen at that point is that First Financial will receive that request and will send out 2 micro deposits, which will then be deposited into your external account that's designated. Once you receive those micro deposits, you'll then come back here, click on Verify External Account, and then depending on right now, we have 2 accounts that are pending. Select the appropriate account if there's more than one, and then enter in the 2 micro deposits amounts that were received, and then click on Continue. As long as those amounts are correct, then what will happen is going forward, you'll then be able to go to Funds Transfers and be able to see those accounts as an option. And let me show how this is going to look. Okay. So the way it's going to look is you'll have the external, it'll be designated as external. And you'll, contrary to the unaffiliated accounts, in this case here, you'll have an opportunity to do both from and also to, two-way funds transfers. So next we're going to go into our commercial, and we're going to start talking about user management. So the first thing I want to do is I want to click on Company Policy. This gives you an opportunity to set additional limitations for all the transaction types within online banking across the board for your company. And in order to do this, what you can do is you can click on one of these transaction types, and keep in mind that the transaction types all get set up the same way, although they do have different functions as far as the actual files that they create. So if I show you how to do one, you'll know how to do them all. So for example, we're going to click here on payroll. This brings us in to the screen which is called Allowed Actions. Now, Allowed Actions, this is where you have the opportunity to set additional restrictions. Keep in mind for your users across the board, for all employees. So now, if you want, you can limit according to draft amount, as far as if we wanted to limit how much somebody can draft for, or how much they can draft for. Number of approvals, this goes all the way up to 5, if we choose. So we can decide how many approvals are required. We have our accounts. This is where you can decide which accounts are eligible, in this case for payroll. So let's say we want to only select these 2 accounts here. So that's where this capability comes into play. Draft hours. Now you have the opportunity to decide what days and times are eligible to be drafting your payroll, for example. So let's say, for instance, you want to set a restriction that nobody in the company should be able to draft payroll outside of normal business hours, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Keep in mind that's also going to be Eastern time. So what we're going to do is we're going to first off click on the days of the week, Monday through Friday. And then we're going to click here on the hours. And the way to deselect the hours, say for instance overnight, is to select them by clicking on it once and then clicking on it again. So double clicking, and we'll deselect our off hours. We'll do the same thing here in the evening. And once I'm done, then I'll have the shaded area, which are the allotted areas for funds transfers in this case, I'm sorry, payroll in this case. In addition, I can also deselect individual boxes as well if you want to be get that specific. So next we're going to click on location. And keep in mind, this is specific to drafting or initiating transactions, not for the approvals. So in this case here, we can allow, say for instance, only servers within or IP addresses within the United States, Canada, or maybe in all of North America. But once you start selecting the countries here, you're excluding the ability to initiate these transactions from IP addresses originating from outside of North America or the countries that are selected. And then finally, we can click on IP addresses. Getting even more granular, this is where you can decide which IP address or IP addresses are allowed for the drafting of payroll. So let's say, for instance, you want to only restrict it to the IP addresses within the company's network. So what we can do is we can enter in a date, enter in a number here. And then if you have the need to specify an entire network as opposed to just an individual IP address or individual server, you can enter in an asterisk. So at this point, we're saying any server on the 144.34.56 network. Alternatively, I can actually enter in a specific number, and this boils it down to just this one computer. Once I'm done, I can click on OK. Now, if I choose, what I can also do is I can test my policy before I actually save it. So I can click on Policy Tester, and I can simulate what a transaction would, what would happen to a transaction, whether I'm testing for a positive or negative test. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to draft $1,000 utilizing this account, and then this subsidiary right here. I can click on, actually, let me also designate day and time. So let's say Monday at 2:00 p.m. If I click on test, what it's going to do is it's going to tell me whether or not a transaction would be allowed based upon the restrictions that I've put into place. In this case, it would. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to go into approval limits. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that with company policy, the limits are actually read-only. This gives you an opportunity to view what the what First Financial Bank has placed in there for you as far as underwriting, but you will not have an opportunity to change this at the company level. When we go down one level and get to the users, that's where you'll have an opportunity to make further changes and restrictions. Next, we'll click on Features. This is where you have the opportunity to view what additional features and functionality on top of online transactions are eligible for the company to utilize. Typically, you'll see more than this in the screen, but this is what is turned on for this user. And then finally, accounts. Now, very important here is the ability to label your accounts. And let me explain what this is used for and how it works. So let's say, for instance, our first 3 accounts here belong to sub-company A, if you have multiple companies. So we can click right here and select those 3 accounts. When I'm done, I can click on Edit Labels. Okay, we're going to say Company A. Once I'm done, I can click on Create and scroll down, click on Add, and then Close. So now we have accounts that are affiliated with Company A. Let's select the next couple of accounts here, and we'll select and make those Company B. This will work the same way, and then we'll go in and show exactly what this is used for. Once again, Edit Labels, enter in the label. We'll say Company B in this case. Click on Create, scroll down, and click on Add, and then Close. So what we have here now is we have Company A and then Company B. So let's now talk about what this is used for. So if I go back over to Overview, and then let's say we go back into Payroll. So I'll click here on Payroll. And then if you recall, we have the opportunity to specify which accounts are eligible. So I click here on the box. And then now what you'll notice is we have Company A and Company B. Now, in this case here, we only have 10 accounts showing. But if you have a large number of accounts and you want to set up all of these different transaction types, and then also when you get down to the user level, you can do this as well. Instead of having to select the individual accounts, you can just select the actual labels, and it automatically then selects those accounts. Same thing with Company B, or I can select Company A and B if I want. And then in addition, I can also add additional. So depending on what the need is, it makes it easier for you to work with. All right, so at that point in time, once we're done, we can then click on Save. Okay, my policy has been saved. hit close, and that would be our company policy. So now user roles are defined as one or multiple users in the system that have identical entitlements and also limits. So let's say, for instance, you have a couple of employees that all do the same job. Let's say, hypothetically, they're payroll clerks, and they have the same dollar limits and entitlements within the system within online banking. So the way you'll do it in the new system is that you will set those dollar limits and entitlements at the role level, and then assign the users. Oh, it looks like we have a question here. Okay, can you have an external transfer to a company with a different name? So in this case here, I assume then you're talking about where you're doing an external transfer. Back when we were talking up here, let me just make sure here. So an external account and to one that has a different name. The answer is yes, but when you're talking about essentially transferring money to and from companies, what you're typically going to want to do when we get into ACH is you're going to want to set it up as ACH. The more often I'll see where the external transfer function is utilized is where you have somebody that wants to transfer money back and forth between accounts that they own, if it's an external account at, like, say, Bank of America. But theoretically, yes, you could, if you, as long as you know what that routing transit number and account number is, you could do it that way too. But more often than not, I see that utilized through ACH. Does that help out with the question? Okay, great, perfect. All right, so I'll go ahead and just pause for a second and just unmute everybody just to see, are there any other questions that anybody else might have? Oh, let me unmute all. Okay, any other questions? Okay. All right, let's go ahead and mute everybody back again. And then I'm actually going to pause the recording because what I want to do is I want to log recording. Okay, so we're going to click here, go back into commercial, and then go back into manage user roles. So now what we're going to do is we're going to show how you can set up user roles. And then also what I want to point out is that you'll notice that these user roles are named according to individual users. What you're going to notice when you log in for the first time into online banking, that each user role is going to be named according to the actual user themselves, and each person will be in their own individual user role. The reason for that is because we do not have the information, or we do not receive the information in regards to what each user's title is. But you'll have an opportunity to edit those user roles accordingly. So let's go ahead and click on one of these and actually go in and talk about the functionality within there. So the first thing you'll see here is that we have the user role looks very, very similar to the company policy. So this will make it easier to be able to navigate and learn the new functionality. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one of these items and talk about the individual functionality within. Just like we did with company policy, we're going to talk about allowed actions. But in this case, what we can do is we can click on operations for the first part, and this is where you can decide whether or not the users have the ability to draft, approve, and/or cancel. But then there's also a concept of draft restricted. So if I toggle this on, you'll notice that draft turns off. But what draft restricted is the ability for you to only provide access to the specified users to batches, or what's called in the new system templates. And then in addition, they will not have an opportunity to delete out, add, or edit any recipients. And for clarification, when we get into the payments, we'll talk more about recipients. Recipients are going to be the individuals or the companies that will be receiving ACH or wires through online banking. In addition, they will not have the opportunity to create any new batches or do any one-off payments if you select draft restricted. So it's very restrictive. The only thing they can do is enter in a dollar amount, an effective date, and a memo for a file. So for right now, we're going to click on draft and then give them full access. So next, we're going to go ahead and we can click on amount, enter the dollar amount they're allowed to draft if you wanted to specify that, and then accounts. Right now, let me go ahead and just do one thing real quick. Let me hit cancel. I noticed that there's no accounts that are showing. Let me, if you'll notice here, they're all turned off. So let me turn them on just so we can show those as well. Let's go back into the ACH payments. Okay, so if we go back over here to accounts, all right, so now if you recall, remember how we set up those labels at the company policy level. Well, they trickle down to the user role level as well to make it easy for you to administer. So I can once again click here on company A and or company B. And then also I can specify additional accounts as well individually. You'll notice the difference between the plus and the check mark here. And then finally, we have draft hours. One additional option that you can maybe utilize is that if you have employees that some work overnight or on the weekends, you might decide not to put any restrictions as far as hours and days at the company level, but you might decide to place restrictions at the individual user role level instead. It works exactly the same as I showed beforehand. You just select the items, and then the shaded areas are the allotted areas. Okay, once I'm done, I can click on OK. And if I choose, I can also have multiple levels of allowed actions as well if you want to do various dollar thresholds. That's the reason for this amount right here. So next we're going to click on rights. So this is an important concept to understand because what this is going to do is this is going to give you an opportunity to decide what access, view access that this user role has. If you recall, when we go to online activity log, this is where you have the opportunity to view and access transactions within the online banking. But now what this is going to do is this is going to specify whose transactions you're able to see as a user. Right now, this is set to more of an administrative function, can view all transactions, meaning that regardless of who initiated the transaction, you'll have an opportunity then to view. So now if we click on can view own transactions, this means that the users in this role can only view the transactions that they themselves have initiated. And then finally, we can view transactions by others in this role. Keep in mind that you can have multiple users assigned to a specific user role. Let's say, for instance, 3 or 4 payroll clerks. And if they're responsible for checking one another's, but nobody else is outside of their user role, you can select can view transactions by others in this role only. And then finally, the last one is cannot view any transactions. This means that even if the user themselves initiated, in this case, an ACH payment, they will not have the ability to view it on the online activity log. So just keep that in mind as well. And then next, we're going to go in and we're talking about approval limits. So if you recall, when we're at the company policy level, those were read-only. But now at the user role level, you'll have the opportunity as an administrator to further restrict, but you'll not be able to add and go higher than what the actual company level is or what the customer level is. So $100,000 is what that's set at. I cannot go any further. It's not letting me click anymore. But now what I can do is I can further restrict, either A, by deleting out individual numbers, or I can click on clear and just manually enter in what I want, what I need. This is going to be per transaction, per account per day, and then per month. One thing I would like to clarify as far as per month, this can cause some confusion. This is referring to the calendar month that you're setting for transactions to be effective. So say, for instance, if you wanted to set up payroll for the entire year, then in this case here, for the effective date, you would only have $3,000 allotted for the month of June or July or whatever that may be. And the same thing for the counts as well, how many you're allowed of these items you're allowed to do. So next what we're going to do is we're going to go into features. In this case, we have the opportunity to provide or eliminate access for the user role if in fact they are or are not an administrator, such as the ability to manage users, company policy, user roles. We'll get into information reporting in just a bit. And then finally, accounts. Now, if you recall at the company policy level, you had the opportunity to maintain and create those labels. But here you can only view them you can only maintain them at the company policy level. But what we can do here is that we can take away or provide access to each account. You can do that all at once, or you can do those individually as well, depending on what the need is. And then once I'm done, I can go ahead and scroll up at the top, and then I can click on Save. So now my policy has been saved. And as I mentioned also, you have the opportunity to edit the name of your policy by clicking on the pencil, and then we can just pretty much put in, like, say, for instance, payroll clerk. The description I can enter in is user defined. So you can decide whether or not to enter a description in for this role or not, and then click on Done. So now keep in mind what we've done is we've changed the name of the role that the users are going to be assigned to, but we did not actually change the actual user name themselves. So what we're going to do next is go into the actual user maintenance and talk about the functionality within there as far as actually putting this into effect. So my policy has been saved. So now I can click on user maintenance. This is where I can access the individual users. All right, so now we're under user management. And the first thing I want to do is I want to be able to add a new user. So I can click here on add user. And the first thing I can do is I can enter in the first name, last name, email address, and phone number, and then login and password. Everything that is required as far as logging into your password is on the right-hand side, just for validation. But the important part also is that we can click here on user role, click here, and then we can assign the user role according to what this new user's entitlements need to be. So say, for instance, he or she is a payroll clerk. We would select payroll clerk and then click on save. Now, one last thing I'd like to mention is that if, say, for instance, we needed to create a new user role because you have a user that has the need to have entitlements a little bit different from anybody else, we can also click on, in a moment, we can actually copy that user role as well. So I'll show that. So we click on Manage User Roles, and you'll see here where we have the copy function. Simply hit copy. And then here's where I can actually change the name. I'm not changing the name of the existing one. I'm making a copy of that one to mirror. So I can say, for instance, sample. Okay, click on continue. And then I can make the changes. Also know that those view rights are also accessible and you can modify them here as well. So we make a couple changes, click on save. So now we've made a new user role that we can assign to a user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show how also you can update an existing user as well. So let's say we have to go into user maintenance and we want to change an existing user like Alexis here. So we can click a pencil and we can click on update role. The newest role is going to be on the bottom. So I scroll down here is sample, and then click on update role. Now in addition, you have two different options here as far as deletion. Either A, you can delete out the user entirely if you know that they're not returning to the company if they've left, or if somebody has been on temporary leave, you can deactivate them by clicking right here. And then you'll see that Alexis is now in gray, means that that she cannot log in until you go back in as an administrator and activate her back again. All right, so next what we're going to do is we're going to talk about payments. This is where we'll go into ACH and wire transactions. So we'll click on payments. And the first thing I want to point out is that there's a concept of what's called templates. In the new online banking system, a template is what you know of as a batch. And one thing I do want to assure you is that if you have any batches set up as far as any payroll, direct deposit, wires, anything like that, you will not need to reset them back up. They will migrate over to the new system, so they will be there for you already, along with all the information in relation to that batch. But in the new system, as I mentioned, they'll be called templates. So what I'm going to do first is I want to show how to work with a template by creating a new one. So we're going to click on New Template, and let's say, for example, we want to do a new, let's do a new ACH collection. Say, for instance, you have a listing of individuals that you need to collect money from on a monthly basis. So we'll click on ACH collection. And bear with us for just a moment. Apologize about the wait. Okay, so what we're going to do first off is that we need to name our template. So let's say we call it monthly collection, monthly dues collection. At the bottom, you'll notice that we have the opportunity to decide who else has access at the company to this new template, and then we click on recipient amount. And just for reiteration, recipient amount, the recipient is going to be the individual or is going to be the companies that you'll be collecting money or providing money to via ACH or wire. So now, since we're on ACH collection, the first thing we need to do is decide, are the recipients individuals or companies? This is going to be what designates the class code. So let's say, for instance, we want to collect from individuals. At the bottom, you'll have an opportunity. If you have other recipients here that are already tied to other templates, they'll also be eligible for tying to this template as well. So what we can do is we can click on, let's say, for instance, employee ID 12345. So now, since employee ID 12345, aka Bill Smith, has more than one account, what I can do is I can decide whether or not I like to split my payments or not. Okay, so what I can do is in this case, we're going to click on just checking, and then click on OK. Okay, so now we have employee ID 12345 attached. If I choose, I can also link up additional as well. And then we can move on. So now what we're going to do is we can click here on subsidiary, but keep in mind that we can either leave the amount at 0, or we can change the dollar amount for the purpose of the template, depending on whether or not the amounts can be the same every time. And then one other thing I want to mention is that if you send out a $0 amount for a credit, the system automatically knows that you want to send out a pre-note to validate that new account. So now I'll click on subsidiary, and I'd like to first off explain what a subsidiary is. If in fact that you have multiple companies of your corporation, if you are a larger company, then each sub-company has its own company name and tax ID. So if in fact you need to send out payroll to a company, essentially for a company that has to designate their own name and tax ID in the header record of the ACH file, this is how you would do that. So you would select the subsidiary and then click on account. Now we need to decide, in this case, this is a collection, so we need to know where are we collecting this money to? What account at the company? So let's say, for instance, we have this company right here, this checking account. So now we know what the offsetting account is going to be. So now we can go scroll up here and then go to review and submit. So at this point, what we can do is we can review the information we've placed into the actual file or into the template. So we've decided that we want two of our recipients to be linked to this template, and then I can click on save. Okay, my template has been saved successfully. All right, so now what we want to do is let's say, for instance, we want to create a file, an ACH file, off of this template that we just created. So what I could do in this case is I can click on effective date, and I can select the effective date of my file. So let's say, for instance, we want to make it the 31st of March, the end of the month. And then also I have the opportunity to set a recurrence. So let's say, for instance, this is going to be a monthly collection. Instead of having to do it every single time, I can click on set schedule. And I can decide, let's say, for instance, we wanted to do it monthly. And then either A, I can select a date to have it stop, or what I can do is I can click and I can decide monthly and repeat forever. And then once completed, I can go down here and I can click on approve, which will then actually send out my transaction. So let me click on approve. Okay, so once my payment's been approved, now I can click on view an online activity log if I choose. And this brings us right, keep in mind again, up at activity log and view the specifics of my transaction, including a listing of my recipients. And also just let me point out that if I do decide to print out this transaction, what will happen is that it will then print out a listing of all of the individual recipients as well. So if you have 100 recipients that you're sending or collecting money from, they'll all be listed there in your printout. So now we're going to click on commercial. And at this point, I want to talk about recipient management. So this is where we want to actually create a new recipient. So as I mentioned, recipients are going to be individuals or companies receiving ACH or wires. So at this point, I can click on Add Recipient. And a couple of things I need to point out. First off, display name is going to be the value you can use to search for this recipient when linking to a template or to a payment. So for that matter, let's say, for instance, we use employee IDs. So I can do EID 555. Now, the ACH name and the wire name, these are the values that actually get placed into the ACH file or into the wire itself. So for that matter, I'm going to actually put the name. So I'm going to say Jim Smith. Okay, so we can do the same thing here. And then ACH ID, if you have the need, you can also put in either the social or the tax ID that will be placed into the NACHA file for this recipient. And then email address I'll enter in here. And then I can click on Send Email Notifications. Let me explain what this is going to do. If I decide to send an email notification to this recipient, this means that at the point when any file that this recipient is linked to, whenever it's being processed by First Financial, at that point is when he'll receive an automatic email notifying him that there is a transaction about to post to his account. So that's what that email notifications is used for. At the bottom, we have additional fields that correspond with the recipient's actual address, but they are optional. So once we've set up the recipient, now we need to click on Next and actually set up the recipient's account. Keep in mind that you can have one or multiple accounts tied to a recipient, but you have to have at least one or else it will not allow you to save them. So in this case, what I decide is I want to click on, let's say, ACH and wire, which means that this recipient will be available to be linked to ACHs and also wires. So watch what happens when I click on ACH only. So now I'm only required to fill in the fields that correspond with ACH. And the same thing for wire only. Watch what happens to the ACH routing number field. Same thing. So now we've essentially narrowed it down to just the wire fields. But I say decide that we're going to use ACH and wire both. So the first thing I'll do is enter in, keep in mind this is going to be the recipient's account. So I need to know what his checking or savings account number is. And then on the right-hand side, this is what we call our financial institution lookup. You can enter in either the name or the routing number of the financial institution that the recipient banks with and watch what happens. So we're going to say Capital City Bank. Oh, let me try that again. Okay, so here's Capital City Bank. We'll select the one in Tallahassee, Florida. Automatically now, We have our ACH routing number and also the beneficiary bank information all filled in. You don't have to worry about entering that in manually if you select the financial institution over here on the right-hand side. So once I'm done, I can click down at the bottom and either click on Save Recipient or I can add an additional account. So we're going to save the recipient at this point. So now here is EID 1555. I now have the opportunity to link this recipient to either an ACH or a wire because of what I selected. So next what we're going to do is we're going to talk about one-time payments and what we call one-time recipients. So let's click on back on payments. And what I want to do is let's click on new payment. Instead of working with templates, AKA batches, we're going to work with a single payment. And let's, for example, click on domestic wire. All right, so first off, one thing I do want to point out is if you notice here, I'm on domestic wire instead of ACH this time, but the workflow is exactly the same. You don't have to learn a different way to do wires compared to ACH. But now at this point, I mentioned that what I want to do is I want to do a wire transfer to an individual or a company that I've never sent money to before and don't ever plan to again. It's called a one-time recipient. And what I can do is I can click right here on new recipient, right on the right-hand side. Now you notice this screen looks very familiar because it's identical to what we just looked at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put in here, I'm just going to say one time. And then the rest of the fields I'm just going to leave blank for now just to get to the next page. And I'm going to click on next. Once again, this should look very familiar. But one thing I'm going to point out in a moment, let's say we want to use only ACH. I'm sorry, only wire. Enter the account number. And then enter in the financial institution. Let's say Chase in this case. Okay, so I click here. Okay, so this is going to, let's see here. All right, so as I mentioned, it's a test environment. We need to essentially finish this up, but essentially it's gonna select all the beneficiary bank information. But the important thing to take away from this screen here, since we're working with a one-time payment, is this box, use without save. So use without save gives you an opportunity to create this recipient, use it only for this one-time payment, but never again. And you might say, well, you know, where does this come in handy? Is if, say, for instance, you're sending wires to various people all the time, and only in a one-time situation. If you just click on Save Recipient, then you're building up the listing of recipients that'll probably never be used again, and it might be a little bit more difficult to manage as opposed to just saying one time only. So that would be a one-time recipient. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the importing of files. But give me a moment, let me go ahead and pause, and I'm going to log out and log back in so that we can refresh our session. All right, so now I'm going to click here on commercial, and we're going to go back into payments. If you recall, this is where ACH and wires are housed. But in this case, we're going to click on new payment and select payment from file. So this is where we have the opportunity. Let's say, for instance, you have accounting software that you want to import in an ACH file to send to the bank for processing. What you can do is you can click here on any one of these three types of transactions. Let's say, for example, payroll. You'll see here that there's a listing of instructions that come up. The important thing to understand here is that the file that you're importing in, if it's an ACH file, needs to have only one batch. If you have an aggregation function and you want to send a multiple batch file, there's going to be another function that we're going to go through in a minute that will outline how to do that. But now what you can do is you can scroll down here at the bottom, click on select a file to upload, and then you can select the file and then click on open, and then at that point in time you can click on upload file. Now in addition, what you'll also be able to do is you'll be able to import in a CSV file. So let's say, for instance, you want to import in ACH for purpose of payments or payroll collection, but you don't have the ACH software. So as an alternative to utilizing templates, you can click here and you could actually view a 5-column CSV where you can open up Excel and you can put all of your recipients into an Excel spreadsheet, save it as a .csv, and then import into the online banking that way. So just for example, I'm going to open up this sample here, and let me just make sure everybody can see this by auto-formatting the column. So just for clarification, and this shows also on the screen, so you don't have to worry about memorizing this. You've got the recipient name, the ABA number, the account number, account type, which is going to be a 1, 2, or 3, which is checking, savings, or loan, and then the dollar amount. And then you save that as a .csv, make sure that there are no headers, and then at that point in time, then you can click on import, the file import, just like we did for the ACH, which is right down here. Select the file to upload, and then click on Upload File. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody and ask if there's any questions.
And probably
she's not even sitting in on it, is she?
probably not, because she's busy doing the
Does anybody have any questions?
stuff or whatever.
Yeah, and
Okay.
with it,
Not at this point.
more than anything to.
All right. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what's called ACH pass-through. So ACH pass-through is an alternative to the file import, where this is where if you have the need to import in a multiple batch file as opposed to a single batch, this is where you would go to do so. Click on Import File, select File to Upload, select the file, and then click on the process date, where I would recommend just using today's date, and then click on Approve, and that will send the file to First Financial for processing. Okay, so next we're going to go and we're going to go into Business Bill Pay. Okay, so right now, as I mentioned, it's a test environment. We don't have anything set up here at the moment, but this will give you an opportunity to go into your Business Bill Pay. Okay, scrolling down a little bit further here, we have locations. So I click here, this will give you an opportunity to view a listing of branches and ATMs, including the directions on how to get there if needed, lobby hours, and drive-through hours. Simply just click here for directions. And you can do that for both ATMs and also for branches. Okay, going forward, we're going to go down here to services, and we're going to click on Stop Payment. So this is where you have an opportunity to stop a payment on either a single or multiple checks. So let's say, for instance, a single check, select an account, enter the check number, and then click on Save on the bottom right. Okay, at this point, you'll notice that you have the opportunity now to send a request because all required fields have been satisfied, which are designated by an asterisk. And then in addition, if you want, you can also enter in the payee information, the amount, the date, or enter a note. But keep in mind that all of these fields here are optional. Once you're done, then you can, at that point, click on Send Request. Next is going to be address change. So address change is where you can select either one, multiple, or all accounts that you would like to select to change your address. Change the address on the right-hand side, just make the modifications, scroll down to the bottom, and then on the bottom right-hand side, click on Submit. Next, we'll go into and talk about e-statements. Simply click on the account that you'd like to see your e-statement for. This will open up in another window. And then you just simply select the statement that you want to view. And it'll come up on the screen. Okay, so we'll now talk about alerts, and keep in mind we're down here towards the bottom. We're under the alerts section. So on the bottom right-hand side, looks like we have a question. So let me, okay, so let's see here. Did anything change with bill payment and our current vendor list transfer over to the new format? So let me go ahead and unmute first off. So if Ginger or Melissa's on the line, as far as the bill payment, it's my understanding that the information will come over, but is there any additional information that you want to provide on that question?
No, everything should populate just the way that it is now. They do want to make sure that they make copies of their payees and verify those when they get transferred over after we go live, just to make sure everything is okay. Yeah, and if it's not, don't set up a bill pay again or another payee again. Call us before you do that.
All right, so before we continue on, first off, does that help with the question, and are there any other questions? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and mute everybody. So now, of course, we're talking about alerts. So at the bottom here, we have security alerts. Right now, they're not turned on, but what I can tell you is that when you click here, you'll have a listing of alerts that will be showing on the screen, some of which will be grayed out, and some of which will be clickable. The grayed out ones are the more critical alerts, such as notify me when my password's been changed, a login ID has been changed, whether or not my secure access code was entered in incorrectly. All items that are critical to the safety of your information and your data. The other ones that you'll notice will be ability to turn them on and off. Those are ones that are a little bit less critical of nature. But now if I click here on Edit Delivery Preferences, you'll have an opportunity to edit how and where you receive those security alerts. Make the changes and click on Save. So now if I click up here at the top, we have the ability to subscribe to additional types of alerts. You'll notice here there are 4 types of alerts. One thing I can tell you is that each of those alert types is set up exactly the same way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show how to set up an alert by using Account Alert as an example, and then we'll talk about what those other alert types are for. So I'll click on Account Alert. First off, I have to select an account, select the field I would like the alert to be generated off of. So I'll say available balance. We'll say less than $100. Once I click on Save, at this point now I can click here and decide how I want to receive that alert, whether I want to receive a text message, a secure message only, email, or a phone number or a phone call. So I say, for example, text message. So I'll enter in my cell phone number for the text. Click on Send Immediately. Either A, do I want to receive that immediately upon it occurring, or do I want to say what time I actually want to receive it? So let's say, for instance, 9:00 a.m. And just be aware that this is going to be Eastern time. Once I've decided my time, I'll agree to my terms for the SMS, and then click on either A, I want to receive it upon every occurrence, or if I'm just waiting for something just for the next occurrence. And once I'm done, I can then click on Save. So now my alert's been saved and has been queued up. Now let me explain the other type of alerts, which are set up exactly the same way, just for different purposes. The date alert is exactly what it sounds like. It's an alert based upon a specified occasion, and whether or not it's a birthday, an anniversary, a meeting, a vacation, or really you can even designate a user-defined occasion as well. Your history alert is based upon an item posting to a specified account, whether it be a check number or an amount above or below a certain threshold. And then finally, an online transaction alert. This is one that I do want to show. This is something that comes in very handy. So let's say, for instance, you want to be aware of whenever domestic wire is drafted off of a certain account by any user. So we can say drafted, and now we're going to be receiving an alert, depending on how you want to receive it, anytime that any user of the company drafts a wire. You can also do this for process transactions or authorized. So it just really depends on what the business need is. So click on Back to Alerts, and that would be our online alerts functionality. We scroll down further, we have text enrollment. This is where we can enroll a cell phone in text banking. So enter in the cell phone number, click on Agree to Terms, and at the bottom, click on Submit, or Save, I'm sorry, Save. At that point in time, then this cell phone number will be eligible for submitting text banking codes to query up information about an account or accounts. So next we'll go under settings, and we have account preferences. If you recall, back at the top here, if you recall when we set up various account groupings, this is where you also have an opportunity to edit those account grouping names as well. In addition, you can click on any of these accounts, and you have the opportunity to, first off, you can edit the nickname of the account, and be aware that these account preferences are user by user. So if you have multiple users of the company, each user has the opportunity to set their own account preferences without affecting others. So account nickname, and then also whether or not this account is visible or not within your online banking on the account summary page or the home page. So next we'll click on security preferences. This is where we can change the password. Notice that the requirements are down below here. Change your login ID if you choose. Once again, the requirements right there. And then also secure delivery. This is where you can decide how and where you would like to be able to receive your secure access codes for when you're logging in on a non-registered browser. So we can either edit or delete existing targets, or we can also add new ones down here at the bottom. And next we'll go into statement preferences. So statement preferences is where you can decide from account to account whether or not you'd like to opt in to either paper or electronic. Make your change, click on save, and that save will be saved immediately. Down here we also have themes. So this is where you can decide if you wanted to change the theme of your online banking, which is going to change the background and essentially the appearance. In this case here, this is one of the themes available. In addition, we can also click on privacy policy, which will give you an opportunity to view the privacy policy, and also terms and conditions if you choose to view that as well after you've already been logged into the system. And then finally, help. Help is where you can go in and you can view various topics as far as any explanations. The last item we're going to talk about is reporting. So I'll click here on reports. And this will give you an opportunity to either run on demand or also schedule individual reports within the online banking. The reports are listed on the right-hand side, but also just know that you will not see anything here at the onset. This will be a blank white screen because at first you haven't run anything. This is where they'll accumulate. So all the reports are set up exactly the same way. What I can do is I can click on account activity report, for example. It'll tell me first off what type of formats are available for this report, which accounts, as far as if we want to select multiple accounts, we can also select them via our Company A and Company B labels as well, if you recall when we set those up. Date range, either a dynamic date range, like say for instance last business day, or we can specify a date range as far as from and to the actual calendars. We'll say dynamic date range, and then at the bottom here, we can also decide how often it should run. Once I'm done, I can click on save and run, or just save if I don't want to run it on demand immediately. And then this is going to bring me back to my listing of reports. Be aware that the newest ones will be down at the bottom. So if I scroll down all the way here at the bottom, we should have one that's actually in progress right now. But if I show one that's already been run, I don't know if there's any data in there, but we'll take a look and show what it's going to look like. In this case, I selected the PDF to view. And here is our report. Right now, there's no actual information in there, but this is what the report will look like. And as I mentioned, there are various types of reports that can be run. We talked about the account activity report. Cash position is going to show you a listing of balances for all your different accounts. Company entitlements will give you an opportunity to view the company policy and also all the user roles in detail in a snapshot. outgoing wires is going to detail all of the outgoing wires specified according to the account and date range that's entered. Same thing with transactions, the other online transaction types that are specified. All right, so let me go back over to the reports just to finish that up. And we're just about out of our allotted time, but I think we'll just come in right under the wire. Company entitlement reports I talked about, outgoing wire reports and transaction reports. Company user activity report will show you an opportunity to see activity based upon specified users, specified date range, and specified transaction types. And then finally, ACH online origination, which would be your alerts, your actual origination of your ACH within online banking, specified accounts and date ranges. So that would be the last part of the system that we want to cover